yeah, it's been a really humbling experience. And I wouldn't say that I'm completely out of the woods. I feel like sometimes I still do have those fears come up, and as I mentioned, it was activated by this little car collision. These fears are still there, that there's something wrong with my body, and that feeling uncomfortable symptoms is not okay, right? But I've definitely broadened my perspective on what illness really is, and how we can actually just honor our body's natural mechanism that's always striving towards wholeness. There's nothing ever wrong. And I would even go so far as to say there's this notion out there that our bodies are attacking themselves. And I would say I completely disagree with that. And I know that's quite controversial to say, because the label autoimmune is a really big label right now. But I personally believe that the body is way too brilliant to ever attack itself, So even with labels like autoimmune, I actually think that it's, again, the body trying to get back to wholeness, and we're just calling it like a self-attacking thing that it's doing, but it's truly not. Yeah, it's just I see.
I mean, there's a lot of like gold nuggets to like you said before, to unpack. And I'm so thankful that we have this conversation, because while you were talking, it's a very big theme to really allow ourselves to shift perspective, because and always ongoing, because it's so easy to get stuck or get back also into old way of doing things, because we are going to be raised like that in a society which is built into this disbelief of, okay, we are sick, so even sick, there's something wrong with us, and we need to heal, we need to take medication in order to become like healthy again. But what you said about the wholeness, it's and I'm 100% like putting my signature under it. And even also with the autoimmune what is it, autoimmune, how do you say it,
disease
disease,
labels. Yeah.
Autoimmune disease. I mean, those labels, they are made, I mean, I do have all my personal like things with those labels, and I also believe those labels are sometimes very helpful in order to classify them. But again, it's kind of like classifying and putting into like boxes. And of course, we are all, like a unique expression of God and of the divine and whatever wants to come through us. But it is also not a secret that the Western and the Eastern way of thinking and teachings or whatsoever are very not in alignment. And what I'm going to create also with our conversation and with our podcast, especially in regards to the masculine, in regards to the feminine, in regards to also why do we have this conversation now when the podcast calls Masculinity Now? Why do we have the conversation in regards to the medical system? And there was also one thing that I wanted to hit home. Oh yeah, before we go into this, I totally agree. And I wanted to say, even with having cancer, we always say, and this is like how powerful our words are and how powerful our own creation ability is, because I personally believe everything what we can create, we can also uncreate, basically. And it has also to do with cancer. And I know it's a very controversial theme, but in my world and in my belief, and that's the truth that I found out within myself, because I learned how to listen to my body, so did you. And I believe that we found out the same thing what is our personal truth. And it's in regard of the disbelief that we need to fight something. And it doesn't mean we need to fight our body, we need to fight the sickness, we need to fight the cancer. There's always like, yeah, we need to fight it. But what does great fight and war actually do? We see it also, like, we don't see it even in our internal world, we see it also in our external world. It creates even more division, and it creates even more separation. And so it comes back all together in becoming whole within ourselves. And with that being said, I would love for you to give me a little insight of, you know, your body actually, like, what did your body for you wanted to establish more, and also to learn in regards also to your own masculine and feminine experiences within, but also external?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say there, especially to go off of what you were just saying. But I really think my body was trying to get me to stop waging war against myself. Like you were just talking about, this warlike mentality of just trying to kill this virus or this bacteria, or, you know, anti this, anti that, fight the cancer, you know, fight whatever. And I think I was definitely at war with my body, just, you know, even having like body image distortion. And I mean, a lot of women grow up having that, right? As like a teenage girl, I just remember, like, my friends and I started to look at our bodies differently, and we started to diet and started to just harbor this hatred towards our bodies. And I mean, it was just so unnecessary. But I really think that my body was trying to get me to this place of really loving it no matter what, right? And yeah, I just keep going back to what you're saying about this war mentality. I think it's not the natural divine masculine way of seeing things, but I do believe that it is the wounded masculine way of seeing things, of seeing the body, right? It's like this enemy that we need to prevent from attacking us, or you know, this vulnerable thing that we need to protect, right? So I think the like masculine in its balanced form sees an issue, sees an imbalance, and tries to find a solution, which I actually think is very healthy. But the problem is when we start to look at everything as a potential threat, right? And then we just start to be violent and aggressive with the way that we deal with these things. Did I freeze for a second? Okay.
No, you're okay.
So one of the things that my Ayurveda teacher says all the time is that the masculine approach, and she's speaking specifically about Western medicine versus Eastern medicine, and she's, you know, she talks a lot about how Western medicine tends to be the more masculine, left brain approach to taking care of the body. And then Eastern healing traditions are more of the feminine form medicine. They're more the intuition, the connection to nature. And of course, both of them have their place. But what she always says is that when the masculine is in balance, it's that intelligence, it's that cleverness, it's that ability to really see a problem and find a solution, and you know, move things along. But the problem is when it becomes distorted, then you start to be a little too clever but not wise. And so she gives the example of when do you know what Roundup is? It's a weed killer. It's very toxic to the environment. So, but you spray it on weeds and then it kills the weeds. And she always says, like, with Roundup as an example, that's an example of man being clever but not wise. And so
Mm,
when we're trying to just eliminate issues and not really look at what's causing those issues in the first place, and not going down to that root imbalance,
mm,
we're just throwing grenades and bombs and, shooting rifles at these surface issues, and actually creating bigger issues down the line as a result of that. So yeah, that was was a really roundabout way of answering your question, but I do feel that my own experience allowed me to tap more into that feminine form way of approaching my body and healing my body, and just tuning in with my body and seeing how I can honor it and nurture it and heal it from a more loving place rather than an attacking and violent place. And again, just to repeat, that's not the balanced masculine. That's truly just the wounded, distorted masculine that's doing all of that.
and how do you feel, or why do you think this wounded masculine? And I just also want to be clear, when we talk about like masculine and feminine, I also talk about, and we also talk about, we have all those energies within. And it's not about like, okay, this is like the man outside. No, 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 no. It's also about like, we have also the masculine forces and the feminine forces within, but we also have the wounded masculine forces and the wounded feminine forces within. And what or who would you say led you to helping you to release the wounded aspects of the imbalances within yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't one particular person or one particular moment on my healing journey. I think there were, that's the question you're asking, right? Like, can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, no, of
Just want to
course.
make sure I know.
Yeah, let me think about how I can rephrase it. Okay, so you were saying that, okay, let's keep it like this way. There's a saying, and it says like, when we slow down and really feeling how our nervous system can breathe again, we realize how much trauma is running through our through our life. And um and I'm wondering what, in your perspective right now, led you to the fact that trauma was running your life. Because you just said like, you're like, so I wanted to break down to the root with you, so because you were giving me this beautiful metaphor with the weed, and it's like saying like, it's even like very unwise. And what is the saying from Albert Einstein? He basically like says that it's like insanity is if you do things over and over again and expect a different result. And it's kind of like really believing that when you're doing things over and over again, and you're being sick and you do medication, and again, you do things over and over again, you're being sick, doing medication over and over and again, or even relationships, you're bumping into the same people, same energy whatsoever, but different bodies, and expect a different result. There is something deeper that you need to look within, and this is the root. So my question is, in your experiences, when you feel into your heart, what was the root cause of you actually like feeling so unsafe and overwhelmed and wanting to go instead of like being?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that a big part of that was me growing up feeling like I always needed to be perfect and always needed to prove myself, and truly and honestly always feeling like I wanted approval from my father. And I love my father dearly. He was born and raised in Israel, and he is the son of two Holocaust survivors. And he grew up in this, very warlike energy and this kind of aggressive energy where everyone just kept their emotions to themselves. It was weak or soft to express sadness or grief. Anger was acceptable. And if you go to Israel, you can feel the anger energy in that country. But other than that, no other emotion was really acceptable. And so I just remember growing up and seeing my dad have a lot of anger outbursts and not seeing any other range of emotion from him. And as a little girl, that totally freaked me out. And I also saw how activated and triggered he would get by how emotional my mother was, because my mother was super tapped into her emotions, my whole life at least. And every time I saw her having like an emotional breakdown and I would see how he would react, he would get really angered by it and triggered by it. I learned that emotions are not good to express, basically. And
Yeah.
so I tried for so many years to just suppress all my emotions and just be that perfect person who doesn't ever look imbalanced and doesn't ever look like she's having a rough time. And then in school, that translated into always needing to have perfect grades and disappointing myself if I didn't. And my father was always very supportive of me in school, but it's interesting that most of us, when we're growing up, we only really get praised if we do something good or correct, right? Or if we do
Mm.
something right, if we get 100 on our test, or if we sing well in the musical. And we don't get a lot of encouragement when we do something that it might look like, and I'm putting air quotes here, failure from the outside, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. And I always just felt like suppressing everything and pushing myself to be perfect in every subject in school and all the sports and music and extracurriculars. I always felt like that was the way I needed to be.
Mm.
And that's something that's just totally not sustainable. And I'll be honest and say that the perfectionism is still something that I'm very much working through. It's still really hard for me to release that. And it's interesting that I think this Virgo full moon, which is, we're recording today on the Virgo full moon, I was
Mm-hmm.
reading a piece about how it's the full moon where we really ought to be looking at where we're still holding on to perfectionism and releasing that. So yeah, very fitting that we're talking about this now. But I basically think that perfectionism kept me in this trauma state my whole life, and it kept me in this state of complete contraction. Like, even as I'm talking, I can feel my physical body just contracting and tensing up, and my shoulders getting tighter. And yeah, just it's just really interesting how we can keep ourselves stuck in these patterns. And sometimes, as you were saying earlier before we started recording, sometimes it really takes that massive kind of shocking traumatic experience to shake us up from that pattern, that stuck pattern. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
And thank you
Mm,
so much, even for going down this road,
yeah.
and I personally believe that many emotions that we are not aware of anymore because we grew up, but get stored in our body as when we are like little childs, and of course we want to express, we want to be, and especially for us girls, and it goes both ways, but in my own experience, I experienced this. We as women, we are daddy little girls, you know, and
Yeah.
we want the approval. We want to make it good. And especially for the relationship with men and women, for men and their mothers,
Yeah.
it's the same round. So I find it very interesting to, you know, to go and see what we carry within us over a longer amount of time, and what emotions or what emotion do you feel your body got stored over all these years so much? Which emotion do you feel you were also able to tap more deeper into and also release it?
Mm. So when you first asked that question, I was going to say the sort of obvious answer, which to me feels like sadness, because when I started to experience these debilitating symptoms, I I all of a sudden was not able to control my emotions, and I would just cry every single day. I mean, I must have cried for 2 years straight, every single day. I mean, I'm surprised that I had any tears left in me. But
Mm,
that to me felt like I was releasing a lot of sadness and grief, right?
mm,
But if I really think about it, I think that that was just the grief and the sadness about suppressing another emotion that is actually stored much deeper within me, which is the emotion of anger.
mm,
And
mhm.
I really feel like that was the one emotion my whole life, and it's still something that I struggle with, that I just never let see the light of day. Like I just suppressed it down deep into the core of my being, and would never let come out. And going back to what I was saying about my father, I just was so opposed to that kind of energy because I saw it so frequently, and I saw his anger outbursts as, very scary experiences for me, that I never wanted to associate with that type of energy. And then when I saw my mother giving back that anger to him, because she really did know how to do that, I I got even more triggered by it, right? So yeah, my whole life that emotion of anger just basically hasn't existed.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I've fully released it along my healing journey. I think it's still something that is asking to be witnessed and held more at this point.
And while you were talking, what emotion did you feel when this person who hit you with the car just
Mm.
left?
Yeah, after the shock wore off, it was just this pure anger. Like, yeah, pure anger at this person for being so unaware and so unconscious of her surroundings, that she could do something like this and affect me in this way, and truly, if we look at it, it has nothing to do with her, but she obviously activated that within me, right?
And were you able to express your anger since then?
Honestly, not yet. Not yet. I mean, I I expressed it a little bit, and I felt like, I think I cursed a little bit as I was driving away, and tried to shake out that anger, but it's really interesting. I think it's an energy that is so it's so taboo, like not only for me, but I feel like a lot of people, and I think especially women, but also men,
Mm.
because now they're being demonized for expressing any sort of anger, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's just an emotion that nobody really wants to deal with or talk about. And then because of that, it expresses in a very distorted way in society, to the point where we do have extreme violence and wars and all these unnecessary things that I personally feel wouldn't be happening if we actually were able to deal with our anger in a healthy way.
Right. And
Yeah.
especially like sorry, but especially generational
Mhm.
drama is a thing. And you mentioned your father was raised in Israel, and there were like when you see this country, there's a lot of like there's lot of anger, there's a lot of deep history and a lot of
Yeah.
sadness and experiences of violence. And it's one way to express anger in an imbalanced way of being loud and aggressive and too controlling and slamming doors and bombing and going into war. The other way of the imbalance of expressing anger is to suppress it and
Yeah.
to just go through life with not dealing with any kind of conflicts or not dealing with any kind of like, okay, this because this energy needs to move, it's still stored. And here we come back into the aspect of the wounded mechanism, like um the wounded aspects that we also like pass on through our generations.
Mhm.
And I also personally believe that anger is in my world, anger is my favorite emotion because I learned it in a way of like, okay, there is something what crossed my boundary and I was able immediately to express it, but I was not able to express it in a healthy way. Um, there was a time where I didn't express my anger anymore because I was cut off of it. So my body, I could really feel that my body really holded on to this immense of anger that was just able to be expressed in unhealthy situations or like unhealthy habits.
Yeah.
Um, so my question is for you, how do you, what do you feel you would like to do when you would be able to express your anger so it can be moved into
Mhm.
your system and out of your body?
So the first thing that I feel needs to happen is to actually acknowledge the anger, because I feel that so many of us don't even want to go there. We don't even want to
Mhm.
think that we have that kind of shadow energy within us, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we see all this violence around us, and I know that most of us are thinking, oh, I would never be capable of doing something like that. I could never possess that kind of energy. But I feel that every shadow exists within all of us, right? But if we're
Mhm.
not acknowledging it, that's really dangerous. So I would say the first thing would definitely be to just acknowledge that I do have anger towards this person, towards myself for not being more present or whatever, and just to sit with it for a bit, you know. And something that I do with my clients a lot in my body talk sessions is I'll just have them tune in with an emotion that they're feeling. And then sometimes it comes up for me intuitively and we work with it that way. Other times I just ask them, like, hey, what emotion are you feeling right now? And then they tell me. A lot of the times it is anger, right? And they feel very uncomfortable dealing with it, but we just sit with it together, and I just allow them to or not allow them, but I hold space for them to tune into what part of the body they're feeling this anger arising, right? And
Yeah.
then from there, just sitting with it and breathing into that anger and not trying to shift it or change it, but just seeing what it feels like. Because I think that's one of the biggest issues with anger, is that we don't even want to look at it, right?
Right.
So that would be the first thing, is just tuning in with that energy, feeling where it is in the body, because I think all the emotions reside within our body, they get stored there. And then once you're actually kind of tuned in with it, then I feel you can take it to the next level and actually start to move the energy of anger outwards and express it in a healthy way. And I think for me, whenever I have really expressed my anger, the best way for me has been to go in my car and just, close all the windows and just scream bloody murder, basically, and let it out. I remember, I think our mentor Dave was saying that he suggests that some people go to, I don't know what they're called, like these rooms where you can just break things. do you remember
nice.
this? But basically you can just like take dishes and throw them against the wall. And, obviously you don't do this in your home, but there are like safe containers where you can express anger in that way.
You can do this in your home too.
Yeah. Sure. Maybe not with your grandmother's china, but
no.
Yeah.
But that's a really good, that's a really important message that you have here, and especially like expressing the anger. Like for me, I scream underwater. So every time, that's why I need to live close by the ocean only to express my anger, because like it is just releasing, and it's kind of like the energy needs to move, and it doesn't matter if you're angry right now. No, I also go underwater when I'm not angry, and then I release it. I start to release it, and I'm like, wow, that was a lot of emotion, and it really like moved in a way that I feel like, ooh, I can breathe, like I feel my throat, I feel like the power, I feel like energized, and yeah, Coco, like, I mean, why we don't just, do what you do with your clients? Why let's see what the anger wants you to know. Because in the end of the day, it wants your acknowledgement. It wants to be there right now. And if you want to, we can totally do this right now.